Before I move on to Hong Kong, I want to talk about one other specific thing relating to Biden. I don't want to over-Biden you or overburden you. I've caught Balthazar on this one. With the Biden stuff. But there is one other point that I want to touch on in case some random person comes across this particular video and gives this particular video a fair listen, because I tend to be earnest when I present my particular point of view. Electability. This notion that Biden is more electable. My great aunt was in a situation where my mom was talking to her and she says, Biden is the only person that could beat Trump. And my mom said, why do you think that? Now, that's the most interesting question in the world that my mom asked. Why do you think Biden is more electable? Well, because I think he could beat Trump. What you're really asking, though, when you're talking about electability is ultimately everyone will have a different idea on the specifics of what they would mean from the standpoint of electability. But in a bare bones way, it's what do I think the outside world is? Meaning this world outside of me, based on the media I watch, based on the media that I agree with, and based on the version of the world that I agree with, what do I believe that version of the world will accept? And whatever the version of the world is, whatever the specifics of their version of the world that they believe the world looks like, they say Biden is the guy. He's the guy that the outside world is willing to accept that can beat Trump. My question becomes, why do you believe that? And that's where the answer gets more interesting. Because what? Because what? What is of the world that you believe so fervently in, that you believe Biden is putting out, that you believe the world wants to consume? I find that to be more interesting because that often yields nothingness. It's based on air. There's no there. Biden has been in your cognitive framework for the past 40 years. And because he's been around for the past 40 years, you've gotten to know who Biden is, at the very least from the optics and a political thing. But it's not even that you know who Biden is. What you know is a physical imprint in your brain about a particular individual that has been in the public limelight. You don't know everything that Biden was doing in that particular office, even though you may feel like you know Biden. It's like Shaq selling Preparation H cream. Shaq can sell Preparation H cream because you've seen Shaq. He's been playing basketball for 20, 30 years. You've seen him in the public limelight. And as a human faculty, this thing in our emotional makeup that can be tricked and taken advantage of is the moment that you feel like you know somebody, that person feels like a friend to you, even though you don't know that person at all. It is just the media personality that is configured to get you to buy stuff. Joe Biden is the exact same thing as Tom Jones, who's 1,000 years old, but still can get on a stage, and women at the age of 80 still look at Tom Jones like he was 15 or 20, shaking his hips, and those women will take their underwear off, fling it on stage. Why? Because the Tom Jones that they see is like anybody else. He looks like the younger guy that was there, because from their standpoint, they remember him from where he was. It's a cognitive framework. You never quite know the individual per se, even if you were friends with the individual, even if it's your mom. You always get the individual quite off to some degree because you have no idea what's going on inside that particular person, even though you might have a general idea of that person. That person, to some degree, will always get their assessment of themselves wrong. So this notion that people know Joe Biden, it's an emotional thing. It's not a reality thing. That's the first point. The second point is that your version of the world, I need to understand, why do you believe that version of the world will accept Joe Biden over a Trump? And I suspect that a lot of people's version of the world is based on the media that they consume and that they agree with, but understand and have a bit of doubt that that's just the media that you consume. That's not the actual outside world. I want to have a conversation on this notion of electability. And I want to have that in the context of one Joe Biden. And I would like to make the point that Joe Biden is not more electable, that he has certain weaknesses that have been exposed just in this short campaign period of a few months that will be derided and relentlessly mocked in the next election if he gets in that election with Trump. And you're seeing signs of it right now, even in the primaries. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is Soapbox After Dark. Guys, if you like this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon, not to mention Super Chats or Streamlabs. I want to just a quick video about the notion of electability, and it's particularly in the context of Joe Biden. And I often say that this notion rests on air. I think he's electable because I think he's electable. Often, this boils down to a heartfelt thing and a media thing. But the media thing is really boils down to your own media. Unless you're looking at conservative media and independent media and all this other stuff, it's hard to get an idea of what the outside world is. You can look at polling and get an idea on what people may like or dislike, but even that to some degree is dodgy because there are plenty of polls that don't line up to the actual result of the election. If you're going to argue to me that Biden is more electable, I need to know why. And what I would make the point is that he is not more electable, and not just not more electable. A candidate that gets on one stage after the next and murmurs, mutters, mumbles, goes incoherent, can't remember where he is, can't remember Obama's name, loses his political acumen, calls Margaret Thatcher Theresa May, doesn't know dates and times, lies flagrantly. That candidate is not up to the task. Because you must understand, the Democratic Party in the primary is not going to hit Joe Biden with the stuff that the Republican Party will hit Joe Biden with. He will get called sleepy. He would call incompetent. He would get called mentally unfit. Every video that Joe Biden has ever had where he has gone incoherent, has said something stupid, utterly ridiculous, will be played up and will be put on loop. They will deal with him and talk with him purely from the standpoint as if Joe Biden is mentally unfit, that he is prone to mental blips. They would call him sundown Biden, that he had to have naps. All of that stuff will be relentless, and he will be hit with all of it. But on top of that, he would also be hit with his record. The electability argument is an argument for the left, meaning an argument for the Democratic Party. That's not an argument for the rest of the world. This notion that Biden is electable is not built on anything. It's one thing if you argue, I think the public would accept these policies. Meaning, if I make an argument for Sanders, my argument is Sanders wants to do X, Y, Z. He wants Medicare for all. He wants expansion of Social Security. He wants to fight for workers. He wants transformative justice from the standpoint of a criminal justice system. He wants to protect media from billionaires, meaning having somewhat of a firewall so media can report their stories without fear of recrimination from the billionaires that pay them. That's a transformative agenda. When I argue for my candidate, I argue for my candidate from the position of this is what he's putting out there because this is what he wants to do. He wants to support workers and turn the government in an orientation that is from the standpoint of the public itself. That's what he wants. That's my argument. That's my pitch. That's Sanders' pitch. Every stage that he gets on, he doesn't shut up about it. That's his pitch. What's Joe Biden's pitch? Explain to me how he's electable when ultimately what his pitch rests on is that he's more electable. I'm saying this doesn't mean anything. It's air. Your perspective of the outside world is just your perspective of the social media and the other stuff that you consume. Social media, real media, those type of things. But those are things that you choose to consume. You choose that stuff based on ideological frameworks and belief systems. The people who you accrue around you are also oftentimes people who are within your ideological frameworks and own belief systems. There may be gradations and variants, but ultimately, for the most part, you have insulated yourself with people who think and act like you. Hillary Clinton didn't win that election. But media had her winning 98-2. She failed miserably. One of the things that should have gotten us across is the enthusiasm gap. If you look at Joe Biden's numbers, he's not getting individual donations. He's getting donations from people who are giving him a lot of money. He's not giving individual donations because people don't necessarily care about Joe Biden. They're not voting for Joe Biden because they believe Joe Biden is going to do anything for them. They're voting for him because they think he can beat Trump. People are so terrified and beaten down that they've been willing to accept a candidate that is essentially a 90s dinosaur, not based on any notion of policy prescription, but based entirely on, okay, he could beat Trump and get him out of office. Why so glum? Do you really need to be that beaten down? And do you really want to focus on this notion of a candidate who, again, I ask you, why do you believe he's more electable? Why do you believe that he is somebody who you can sell to the outside world? And why do you believe that the outside world will treat him so gently as they're treating him in the Democratic primary? They will not. They will not. Not to mention, Joe Biden has problems in his record, meaning going beyond the mental cognitive glitches and stuff like that he'll be derided by. There are issues associated with the issues that Joe Biden pushed for. Meaning, do you honestly believe that Donald Trump would not use the fact that he pushed through a First Step program to attack Joe Biden's criminal justice history? Meaning Joe Biden took every opportunity to lock up blacks, even working with racists to do so. Do you think that that wouldn't come up in the debate that I got all of these people out of prison and Joe Biden was throwing them in prison for 40 years? Yes, it would come up as a weakness in Joe Biden's case. Do you think the lying would be an issue? Meaning lying comes off the table because Joe Biden is a flagrant liar himself. You can't even attack Trump with that particular weapon. That should be a weapon. NAFTA. Joe Biden voted for NAFTA, the Iraq War. Joe Biden voted for the Iraq War. When Donald Trump is going to make the argument, I've kept us out of wars, that guy is going to get us in the wars. Joe Biden, whatever you think of electability, is the weakest candidate to put up against Donald Trump. I know he looked strong on paper, but you guys thought Hillary Clinton was strong on paper. You thought Trump was working with the Russians. Neither of those things ended up being true. You have a certain ideological framework. And from that framework, you accrue certain people around you. That becomes your world. But that is your world. That is not the world. And it doesn't necessarily work on that logic. Clearly, it doesn't work on that logic because Clinton is not in the White House. Biden is going to be cast as an incompetent, mentally unfit globalist that is going to get us into more wars. When I kept us out of wars. He's going to say that Biden is going to capitulate to China. I am fighting China. He's going to say that Biden went for NAFTA. I reworked NAFTA. He's going to even point to the Iraq war and say that this guy voted for that war when I went after George Bush in the same way. Do you honestly think that Donald Trump won't get on that debate stage and do to Biden what he did to Jeb Bush? Why wouldn't he? And based on what you've seen in the debates, do you honestly believe that Joe Biden can withstand that? He got taken apart by Kamala Harris, who the very next week showed herself to be a paper tiger by getting taken apart by Tulsi Gabbard. He got taken apart by Cory Booker. 2 debates. He has massive weaknesses, is my point. The electability has to be based on something. And what I would argue to you, if you're going to base it on anything, it should be, what does the public want? And can we go about offering the public what it wants? Part of that has to do with a certain degree of vision. My point is not so much that electability is nonsense. It's more so that electability has to be based on something other than electability. And this notion that the public will accept Biden because the public will accept Biden, I don't necessarily accept that premise, especially after what we've seen over the last several months. They're telling him to take naps. We have almost a year ago before this voting. That should be a red flag. Electability has to be based on something. Basic point. If you're going to base it on something, base it on vision. Base it on what we can do. This country is screaming for something different. Do you realize when Obama was in office and Obama pushed for the hope and change thing, that hope and change thing pushed for a certain consciousness in the country. Meaning at the end of his term, the country didn't get that hope and change. And they found it to be a farce. They wanted something different. They wanted something so dramatically different that they put Trump in office. And do you realize on the day that Trump got elected, 60% of the public said he was unfit to do the job? That's how bad they wanted something different. That's how bad they wanted something dramatically different. Obama had a mandate. If Obama was Bernie Sanders, he would have ran with it. He would have punished the banks for their behavior and fraud. They would have locked people up for their behavior and fraud. Pot, at this point, would be legal across the country. You would have a higher wage standard then yeah, I don't even think you would get a Donald Trump in this case. I think you would get another person because the political space at that point would have fundamentally changed. Obama had a period in history where he could have knocked this shit out of the park. The public gave it to him. The public wanted it. They wanted something dramatically different. And you get a blue-collar billionaire. In the same way that Obama was different because he was black, Trump is different because he's a buffoon. This is, of course, dramatically embarrassing to Obama. The first African American to get in office, followed up by the guy who said, "Show me your birth certificate." It's a certain indignity and a slap in the face, if you're being honest. By the same token, the Democratic Party betrayed the middle class. And it's not so much that the Republican Party is going to do any better, it's more so that the Democratic Party betrayed the middle class. And that neoliberal Biden, who, again, look at Biden's record. The vote for Iraq, the vote for NAFTA, the bankruptcy bill, where he's locking people into bankruptcy, the wanting to cut Social Security, the climate change legislation, this kind of middle of the road approach, healthcare. In all of these cases, he is running for the most part against what the party wants. And these votes have been utterly and outright atrocious, especially the Iraq war vote. And now he's lying about whether or not he supported that bill or that vote. I suspect because he realizes that is a cancerous vote. You get the opportunity for the first time in my entire lifetime to choose what you want. There is an inflection point from the standpoint of the party. And you have the first time an expression of what is the left, this politically abused spouse of the Democratic Party that has asserted itself in the standpoint of Sanders. And you have the neoliberal wing of the party, essentially the Clintonites, expressed as Biden. And these two expressions are going at it, just like in the UK with Corbyn and with Boris Johnson. The winner of this, for the most part, will set the agenda for what the Democratic Party is. If it's Sanders and he wins, you have a fundamental change in what your country is. Full stop. And not just that, not so much because he can snap his fingers and that stuff changes overnight. More so because what's considered the Democratic Party, the teetering, the agenda, the hegemonic shift in the Democratic Party, it changes. It's something different. It's a fundamental shift in Democratic policy. And to some degree, you will drag Republicans over to the left on this, or else they just would lose. It's not just a singular thing, is my point. Him winning is something different. This is somebody who is not taking campaign cash, and he's winning in the context of all of this billions of dollars that would be spent to keep him out of office. If he gets through, he's getting through with everything and the kitchen sink being used to stop him. It is a fundamental hegemonic shift in U.S. politics. It is transformative. That's not true for Biden. Biden is a 90s dinosaur. We ran that race once before. The public is screaming for something different. And the public is saying, we want Medicare for all, or at the very least, a Medicare for all type system. Yes, we want expansion of Social Security. Yes, Medicare. And having somebody to finally make that argument, again, this issue of vision. The reason why I'm bringing up this issue of vision and this issue of bringing and supporting stuff is because, again, electability should be wrapped into something. It's not that electability should be discarded, but there should be based off something. And in Biden's case, there's no there there. There's no there there. I would ask you to give that a fair point. To listen to what I've said in this video. I haven't hit him unfairly, but it is something to be said about what are his weaknesses going into the race. And your standard of electability, does it really stand up to scrutiny from the standpoint of what he is going to be up against? And not just what he's going to be up against, what he has supported in the past that is going to be used against him to attack him. So a crowd that has already said no to the last neoliberal that the Democratic Party ran. The party put up Clinton, and the public said no. And for some reason, the party is now saying, hey, let's do Biden. Even Hillary Clinton said if Sanders would have ran, Sanders would have won. Who's more electable? Ask me again, who's more electable? And by the way, look at the polls. If you believe that Biden is more electable because of the polling that says Biden is more electable has Bernie Sanders having almost literally the same numbers by like maybe 1 point. My point is, Joe Biden is not more electable. One person wants it. One person has vision. One person is not accepting money from these corporate sources and is literally powered and funded by you. If you, for the first time in your life, is given the opportunity to actually push for real things in the Democratic Party, things that the Democratic Party often said that it wants. And I'm not talking about the hacks in office. I'm talking about the party itself, just the party hopefuls, the people who just, orient themselves and vote Democrat. Oftentimes, when those people are asked what they want, oftentimes they organize around a platform that is closer to Sanders. I am saying you, for the first time in your life, have the opportunity to support somebody who is not taking that corporate money, meaning he is powered by you. And you can know that he's powered by you because you're the only person who's paying him. You're in the room. First time in your life. First time in your life. His policy prescriptions are in line with you. What are you going to vote? Your fears or your hopes? And this very first time, your hopes actually have the potential to win. And if you would have ran in 2016, would have won. My point to you is you've ran this experiment once in 2016. You thought Clinton was more electable. You thought it was a foregone conclusion. You were wrong. In this particular case, Biden is even weaker than Clinton, despite of what he looks like on paper. And not just that, his political acumen and his mental acuity are failing him. They're failing him. Biden is not more electable. His record is atrocious. And yes, despite Trump being a Republican, he will use that record to attack him mercilessly. Mark my words. Save this video. A vote for Trump or vote for Biden is a vote for Donald Trump. And I will say I told you so, despite what is going to happen afterwards. Because if Donald Trump wins, he's going to get 1 or 2 more Supreme Court picks, which means the Supreme Court is literally going to be full of conservatives. Not just for a generation, but for fucking ever. He could put a Latvian hooker on the Supreme Court if he wants at that point. He will get the Senate, and he may well end up with the House, meaning the Republican Party will get the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, and the presidency. Let alone whatever happens in the various countries, the various states, for the election standpoint. Biden has a hard time filling up a phone booth. Sanders is bringing in buku's crowds. Look for yourself. Don't take what the media is saying. Look for yourself. Look what happened in 2016. And ask yourself the question again. Would Sanders have won in 2016? The answer is yes. And in this case, his support hasn't gone anywhere. And he's catching up on Biden. And this notion of Biden is purely based on this notion that Biden is more electable. He doesn't even talk about the other campaign stuff. He himself has leaned into this notion of electability. His wife has leaned into electability. They're staking it all on this notion that we can win because we can win. Do you want to risk that? Or do, at the very least, you want to take the opportunity for somebody who is polling in the same way, but in this case, not losing his mind, wants it, and is looking for a transformative vision in this country? My point is Biden is not more electable. And you have the opportunity for the first time in my lifetime anyway, and I'm just turning 42, to get something fundamentally different and to create a hegemonic shift in this country. We should have a proper election. The conservative, represented by Trump, and the grotesque face of the capitalistic system, and Sanders, essentially a real Democrat in the traditional sense of the word. I look forward to that matchup. Because I don't think Trump matches well up with Sanders. And I may have blind spots in regards to Sanders' weaknesses. I mean, it is true that the socialist thing is something that he has to explain because people they aren't sold on that particular point. And they would deride him from the standpoint of Venezuela and all this other stuff. But those are just things that come along with the campaign that you have to be able to explain and deal with because there's no reason to run from those things. In fact, of the matter is, if you can win with those weaknesses and go through that door with them attacking you on that front, you changed the system. They threw everything at you and you still won. You have a mandate. Congratulations. But you can't run from it. If you run, they'll chase you for the rest of your life. I'm not going to keep this going. I just wanted to make this very basic point that electability is fictitious. It's based on what you personally think. There's no there to it, especially from the standpoint of Biden. It should be based on something. And I would argue to you, you should base it on policy and vision. That person is Sanders, not Biden. I'll leave it here. Like and share.